Target opened 124 Canadian stores in a single fiscal year. Less than 2 years after its first customers walked through the doors, the company announced it would leave the country. All 133 stores would close. And the most revealing number was not the store count. It was the year Target said the Canadian business might finally become profitable. 2021. That was 6 more years of losses, fixes, and uncertainty. The obvious explanation is that Canadians did not want Target, but Target already had a Canadian fan base before it arrived. People crossed the border to shop in its American stores. They knew the red bullseye. They knew the promise: stylish products without premium prices. So, how does one of America's most experienced retailers enter a familiar neighboring market, open stores at historic speed, and disappear almost immediately? The answer begins before the first store opened, and the breaking point was not hidden in an advertising campaign or a boardroom slogan. It was buried inside the information attached to ordinary products. In January 2011, Target announced a deal that seemed to solve the hardest part of entering a new country. It agreed to pay 1.825 billion Canadian dollars for leasehold interests in as many as 220 Zellers locations. Instead of finding every site one by one, Target could begin with a national footprint. The company initially expected to open between 100 and 150 Canadian stores in 2013 and 2014. It looked like a shortcut, but real estate is not a retail business. It is only the stage on which a retail business has to perform. The acquired locations had housed another retailer. Turning those addresses into Target stores required much more than replacing signs. Target said it expected to invest more than 1 billion Canadian dollars renovating locations. Many selected sites would close for 6 to 9 months while the work was completed. The company planned to invest roughly $10 to $11 million in an average conversion. The buildings were becoming Target stores at industrial speed. But the merchandise network also had to be built from the ground up. Behind every shelf is a chain of decisions: what to buy, how much to buy, where it should go, when it should arrive, how it should be priced, and what the computer should do when a customer takes the last one. In the United States, Target had spent decades refining that chain. In Canada, much of it had to be built again. There would be new vendors, new distribution centers, new software, new tax and customs rules, new employees, remodeled buildings, and a different competitive market. Any one of those projects would be significant. Target was attempting all of them while racing toward a national launch. On March 5th, 2013, 3 pilot stores opened in Ontario. Target described them as the final phase of testing before a wider opening. But the scale already waiting behind those pilots was enormous. By the end of fiscal 2013, Target had opened 124 Canadian stores. Its own annual report called this the biggest single-year store opening cycle in the company's history. Think about what that means operationally. A pilot normally creates room to learn. You open a small number of locations, observe what breaks, repair the system, and expand when the evidence says the model is ready. Target did open pilots, but it also had leases, construction schedules, hiring plans, inventory commitments, and launch dates moving behind them. The learning period was competing with a clock. The stores looked like Target. Bright lights, red signs, wide aisles, familiar private labels. But a store can look finished, while the system beneath it is still unstable. Target's first Canadian annual report after launch was unusually direct. Initial sales and operating results had not met expectations. The company said improvement depended partly on managing inventory well enough to offer the assortment customers expected without creating too much stock elsewhere. That sentence sounds ordinary. In retail, it is the whole game. The financial statements show how quickly the problem became serious. Target's later filings reported Canadian sales of roughly $1.3 billion in 2013, alongside a pre-tax operating loss of just over $1 billion. In 2014, sales increased to about $1.9 billion. But the Canadian operation still produced a pre-tax operating loss of $869 million before the separate cost of exiting. More sales were not enough. The stores needed better margins, better inventory flow, stronger repeat traffic, and time. Retail has a cruel relationship with fixed costs. The lease payment does not shrink because a shelf is empty. The lights, payroll, distribution center, software, and trucks still have to be paid for. That means an inventory mistake can hit twice. First, the retailer misses a sale. Then, the same network continues carrying the cost of being ready for a sale that never happened. If the system believes a product is in the wrong place, the wrong quantity, the wrong size, or the wrong case configuration, every decision downstream can become less reliable. Canadian Business later investigated the collapse by interviewing close to 30 former Target employees in Canada and the United States. Their accounts described an organization trying to recover from basic errors inside the product data that powered the supply chain. A retailer can't simply tell a computer that it sells a blender. The system may need a product code, a description, a price, a currency, a supplier, a weight, the dimensions of one unit, the dimensions of a case, the number of units inside that case, and the number of cases that fit on a pallet. Now multiply those fields across tens of thousands of products. According to the former employees interviewed, mistakes appeared in dimensions, currency, descriptions, quantities, and missing fields. Some measurements were entered in the wrong units or in the wrong order. One incorrect field does not destroy a retailer, but a large network of unreliable fields can make a sophisticated system confidently produce bad instructions. The software is not looking at a shelf. It is acting on the version of the shelf described by the data. Imagine one case of shampoo. The buying system believes there are 12 bottles in the case. The supplier ships 24. The warehouse receives the physical case, while another record describes a different quantity. The store forecast assumes one number. The replenishment system acts on another. No person needs to make a dramatic mistake in that moment. Each team can follow the instruction visible on its screen and still move the network farther away from reality. Now, imagine thousands of products, multiple vendors, 3 distribution centers, and more than 100 stores opening within months. That is why clean master data is not paperwork. It is the retailer's shared definition of reality. If the description is wrong, the system may not understand what it is moving. If case quantities are wrong, it can order too much or too little. If dimensions are wrong, a product may not fit where the plan says it should. If the inventory record is wrong, the system may decide a store needs nothing, while a customer is staring at an empty space. This is how a strange contradiction can appear. Too much inventory in one part of the network, not enough in another, and empty shelves in the place customers can actually see. It is tempting to blame the software, but software does not create accurate data, train a new organization, negotiate with vendors, or decide when a store is ready to open. The technology made the errors consequential. The operating decisions allowed those errors to spread. And every empty shelf created a second problem that could not be solved in a distribution center. It changed the customer's memory of Target. Before the launch, many Canadians already knew the American version. That familiarity created demand, but it also created a comparison. Target was not entering Canada as an unknown retailer asking for patience. It was arriving as a famous brand with a promise people believed they understood. Target's own launch messaging leaned into that familiarity. The stores would be bright, clean, and easy to shop. They would carry well-known Target brands and designer collaborations. The company repeated the same brand promise used in the United States. Expect more, pay less. That promise contains two tests. Expect more raises the standard for assortment, presentation, and experience. Pay less raises the standard for value. If shelves are inconsistent, the first half fails. If prices feel disappointing, the second half fails. The slogan that attracted attention also gave shoppers a simple way to judge the launch. Customers expected the assortment, value, and sense of discovery they had experienced across the border. Instead, many encountered missing products and prices that did not feel as sharp as expected. Target later acknowledged both problems. Chief Executive Brian Cornell said the company had taken on too much too fast, struggled with inventory, and was not as sharp on pricing as it should have been. That combination is more damaging than either problem alone. An empty shelf tells a customer the store is unreliable. A disappointing price tells the customer there may be no reason to return. Together, they weaken both convenience and excitement, the two reasons a mass retailer needs repeat traffic. And retail depends on repetition. The first disappointing visit costs one basket. The second can cost a habit. Once a shopper decides that a store probably will not have the product or probably will not have the value, the retailer must spend more to win back the same visit. Target did try to repair the operation. Former employees described intense efforts to clean up data and improve the movement of inventory. Target's leadership later said the Canadian team had made progress, but a turnaround has two clocks. The first is the operational clock, how long it takes to fix data, systems, buying, replenishment, pricing, and stores. The second is the financial clock, how long the parent company is willing to fund losses while waiting for customers to notice the improvement. Those clocks were no longer aligned. By January 2015, Target Canada had 133 stores and approximately 17,600 employees. Brian Cornell had become Target's chief executive the previous year. His team reviewed the Canadian business and considered narrower alternatives, closing weaker stores, leaving some provinces, or changing the distribution model. The conclusion was brutal. Target said it could not find a realistic scenario that would make the Canadian business profitable until at least 2021. Cornell put the immediate problem even more plainly. Without additional funding, Target Canada could not continue meeting its obligations. The business was losing money every day. On January 15th, 2015, Target Canada filed for protection under Canada's Companies Creditors Arrangement Act and began an orderly liquidation. The headline financial number was about $5.4 billion in expected pre-tax losses on discontinued operations for the fourth quarter. That number needs context. It was not simply the amount shoppers failed to spend. Target said it was driven mainly by writing down the company's investment in Canada, together with exit and disposal costs and operating losses before the filing. The distinction matters because it reveals the scale of the system Target had built, and then decided no longer had a credible economic future. 3 distribution centers, a headquarters in Mississauga, more than 100 stores, thousands of employees, leases, fixtures, software, inventory, and contracts. The failure was expensive because the commitment was enormous. By April 12, 2015, the last of the 133 Canadian stores had closed to the public. Target's distribution centers and Canadian headquarters were closed as well. From the first 3 pilot stores to the final closure, the entire public life of Target Canada lasted just over 2 years. So what actually broke it? Not one data field, not one price, not one executive, and not one piece of software. Target tried to launch the appearance and scale of a mature national retailer before the operating truth beneath it was mature. The real estate deal made speed possible. The brand made demand immediate. But those advantages also reduced the room for a quiet, gradual learning process. The company could open stores faster than it could make every product record trustworthy, every process repeatable, and every customer experience consistent. When inventory problems reached the shelf, they became brand problems. When brand problems reduced traffic, they became financial problems. And when the projected recovery stretched to 2021, the financial problem became an exit decision. That is the lesson hiding inside Target Canada. Scale does not repair a weak operating model. It multiplies it. A pilot is only useful if the evidence can still change the rollout. A powerful system is only useful if the information entering it can be trusted. And a famous brand does not buy unlimited patience. Target Canada looked like a retail empire, almost overnight. But the part customers could not see had not caught up. And once the shelves exposed that gap, 133 stores became 133 reminders that the promise and the operation were no longer the same thing. This is what broke it, where we trace failed products and business decisions back to the moment the system stopped making sense. If you want the next case, subscribe and tell us which failure we should investigate next.